I work at a big company, you know. I can work enough for both of us, so no worries.
Kenneth had said that during our engagement, but as soon as we got married, he changed his tune. He and Matthew would hurl insults at me daily. On top of that, he managed the money himself and skimped on living expenses. He'd complain nonstop, even though he let me do the cooking. Fed up, I declared divorce to Kenneth and left the house. Later, I bumped into Matthew by chance.
Hey, heard you're getting TANF now.
I was surprised. Huh? You must be mistaking me for someone else.
Don't put on airs.
Matthew smirked.
Listen, we're estranged, okay? Don't come crying to me about having no money. I won't lend you a dime. Remember that.
As I opened my mouth to retort, he had already disappeared into the crowd. I lowered my head, feeling the stares of passers-by, my shoulders shaking. I couldn't suppress my laughter. Poor thing, he knows nothing. I can't wait to see his reaction when he learns the truth. I'm Hannah, a 50-year-old housewife. I married Kenneth 5 years ago. When we met, Kenneth was the picture of a fine young man. We met at a gathering of acquaintances, and I found him fun to talk to and very friendly. As we parted, he said,
I want to meet just the two of us next time.
Feeling sad about saying goodbye, I agreed. When we started dating, he mentioned having a son named Matthew with his ex-wife, who was then in 5th grade. We dined together a few times. He was a bright and pleasant boy, just like his dad. A year later, on the night Kenneth proposed, I took a leap and opened up. You know, I live with my parents while working part-time, right? The company I joined right after graduating was a black company, and it wrecked my health.
Is that so?
It was tough to quit, too. I think long hours will be difficult for me in the future. Then, Kenneth smiled kindly.
Don't worry about it. Just stay at home. Look, I work at a big company. I can work enough for both of us.
Relieved by his words, I accepted his proposal. I was glad to have met a good man and believed we were starting a happy married life. I never imagined tasting despair in less than half a year. As we got used to living as a family of 3, Kenneth and Matthew's attitudes changed drastically. They started ridiculing my actions and words in a light tone.
Mom, are you bedridden again? Where's my sandwich?
Matthew frowned discontentedly as he came into the bedroom before school. I had participated in weeding at a nearby park yesterday and felt ill. It was an unusually hot day, and I had felt unwell since the day before. I had asked Kenneth, but he refused with an irritated look.
Being a housewife must be nice. Slacking off all year? I need my days off, you know? Let me rest.
Okay. Unable to get up the next morning due to pushing myself, I apologized to Matthew. Sorry, Matthew, I couldn't prepare your sandwich, so buy one at the grocery store. Handing him money, Matthew grumbled.
Mom, can't you at least make a sandwich? You always take shortcuts with frozen food or leftovers. You're failing as a mom, if you can't even cook.
His words stung.
Don't blame Mom, Matthew.
Kenneth joined in with a half smile as he passed the hallway.
Since you skimped on the sandwich, tonight's dinner must be lavish. Oh, is that so? Then I'll look forward to it. Being a housewife, you should have plenty of time for dinner, right? You're not sleeping until the evening, are you? Make sure to clean thoroughly, without slacking.
The two of them nonchalantly laughed at my poor condition, dropping their insensitive lines before leaving. As if I could prepare a lavish meal. Lying in bed and staring at the ceiling, I let out a heavy sigh. Because Kenneth is an extreme penny pincher. Despite being a section chief at a big company and earning a high salary, the living expenses he gave me were ridiculously low.
It's my salary, so why should my wife manage it?
After we married, Kenneth insisted on this, and I, not opposing, meekly followed. I believed it didn't matter who managed the finances as long as it was done properly. Then Kenneth got carried away and started spending money as he pleased.
It's necessary for work. Drinking expenses are business expenses. It's essential.
Using such reasons as an excuse, he would buy expensive clothes and watches for himself, but make a sour face even when I bought cheap snacks. Since he insisted that a housewife doesn't need an allowance, I had to report to Kenneth and get permission to spend money whenever I went to the hair salon or bought clothes.
One pair of jeans is enough, isn't it? You're buying more?
I want a warm pair for winter.
Fine. Buy them at a cheap store.
I also want to get a haircut. Can I go to the hair salon once every 2 months to maintain my hairstyle?
Huh? What's the point of you trying to be fashionable? If you keep your hair long, you only need to cut it once every 6 months. I won't allow haircuts.
That's why I'm only allowed to buy cheap makeup from drugstores. I want to switch to something better because it's rough on my skin. But he won't listen. Moreover, the living expenses he gives are a third of the average. Within this budget, our nutrition will be unbalanced. I lamented, to which Kenneth responded with a raised chin.
On that TV savings show, they managed to live on this amount.
They had a farmer-in-law providing vegetables and bread. It's impossible with these high prices.
That's your job to manage.
I was distressed by the thriftiness in living expenses, but what I couldn't stomach was about the wreath for Dad's funeral. When Dad, who had been ill, passed away, and it was time to send a wreath, Kenneth visibly grimaced.
We don't need to send a wreath for the funeral, right?
Anyone attending the funeral, other than the chief mourner, should send one.
Really? Then use your savings. It's none of my business.
He said this to me as I prepared for the funeral with tears in my eyes. His utter lack of concern infuriated me. I never planned to ask you for it, so don't worry.
Good. But do Matthew and I really have to go? Our long weekend will be ruined, and I hate that. Right, Dad? I had plans to play a new game.
Although they grumbled, I never doubted they would come. However, Kenneth and Matthew arrived late, barely greeting my mom and relatives, and left swiftly. My exhausted mom didn't seem to have the energy to blame them, but my relatives were furious.
What's the meaning of this, Kenneth?
Your wife's father died, and you're too cold? Matthew, you've received so many gifts and allowances from Hannah's dad. While I apologized to my relatives, I felt my love for the two of them rapidly cooling. Kenneth, always in stylish suits with a refreshing aura, and Matthew attending a prestigious university. Well regarded as a handsome father and son in the neighborhood, they only hurled insults at me at home. They wouldn't come straight home after work or school, wandering around and returning with lipstick and perfume scents. Despite doing as they pleased, they treated me like a housekeeper, demanding lavish meals with a meager food budget. Lately, when I served dishes with chicken or pork, both would glare at me with disdain and hurl insults.
Don't you want to serve your husband good food after he returns from work? If I get sick from eating this poor food, how will you take responsibility? Are you even a mom?
I can make delicious meals, even with chicken or pork. Besides, disliking vegetables and fish, you'll get sick with such a picky diet.
I'm saying I'd eat, if it were high quality. Don't complain when you can't satisfy us. I don't need advice from someone as frail as you.
They used to eat while complaining, but lately, they just leave the food untouched. Yet, if I don't cook,
are you slacking off even though you're a wife?
They would yell. I eat the leftovers for breakfast or lunch the next day, but tears well up, wondering for whom I'm cooking. As for their meals, they subsist on store-bought sandwiches, instant ramen, and snack foods. Eventually, Kenneth was diagnosed as pre-diabetic in a company health check, and Matthew started gaining weight. It was an inevitable outcome. Then they lashed out at me.
What kind of wife makes her husband and child sick? We don't need a useless person like you. We're getting a divorce.
Then I'll leave. They were surprised when I agreed easily.
Are you sure? You're unemployed. You've been living off me. How will you survive now?
Don't worry about me. I'll send the divorce papers for you to sign later. Please leave my stuff until the movers come to pick it up.
Nobody's going to take your stuff.
Kenneth sneered.
You'll definitely regret divorcing a high-earning, handsome guy like me. A kind husband who lets you be a housewife with 3 meals and naps. There's no one else like that in the world, right? That's right. You've been living in luxury on Dad's money till now. You'll struggle from here on.
While I packed clothes into my suitcase, Kenneth and Matthew kept talking endlessly behind me. Honestly, I envy Kenneth's ability to overestimate himself so much. When we were dating, I saw this part of him as confident and shining.
You'll just go back to your parents, right? Say hi to your pensioner mom for me. You two will be heading straight to poverty. Matthew, I bet they'll end up on TANF soon.
Matthew laughed at Kenneth's prediction.
They already reek of poverty, but with Grandma, it'll be the ultimate. The funeral the other day was nothing special. It smelled like poverty. I thought so too. Like a poor family's funeral. I want a lavish one, Matthew. Got it, Dad. But for Dad, who works at a big company, and me, attending a prestigious university, poverty is a different world.
Their endless comments infuriated me, but realizing it was pointless to respond, I let it all go. After returning home and explaining everything to Mom, she lowered her voice. At the funeral, seeing Kenneth and Matthew, I felt something wasn't right, but I thought it's not good to interfere too much in my daughter's household and kept silent. I was too preoccupied with Dad's care. I'm sorry for barging in like this. It's okay. I've been lonely without you. Why don't you stay here? Thanks. But once I get my job on track, I plan to move to an apartment. Mom's concern was comforting, but living with her might make me too dependent. Living nearby and visiting occasionally would be the right balance. Yes, Kenneth and Matthew mocked me as unemployed, but in fact, I've been working from home. It all started with the budget recipes I posted on my blog. After receiving many positive comments, I boldly launched a cooking site and shared my recipes, which quickly gained readers and internet fame. Soon after, an editor from a major publisher approached me, and now I'm gradually preparing to publish a cookbook. Thanks to this, I had no time to dwell on the divorce, and days flew by. One day, my phone rang insistently. I paused, stirring the ingredients in the pan, and answered the phone. Hello?
Hey, what's this about a deposit for the divorce trial?
I sighed, knowing it was about that. You and Matthew hurled endless abuse at me.
Oh, I thought, never mind.
Relief in his voice, Kenneth continued.
I didn't cheat or anything, you know? What? Did you record me and Matthew? Your memory alone won't cut it.
I've noted everything in my diary.
Try and claim it if you can. Really, poor people and their obsession with money, you reek of frugality. If you think you can get a deposit for the divorce trial, go ahead.
After his outburst, Kenneth hung up. I finished cooking and visited a detective agency, requesting an investigation into Kenneth's background. Soon, his affair with his subordinate was uncovered. The day after sending the 2-shot photos and investigation report to his company, Kenneth contacted me again.
You, spreading this at work is low. The angry manager reported it to the higher-ups, and now I'm fired.
Oh, she was the manager's daughter, wasn't she? It's your fault for cheating, knowing they're strict about such matters. I continued laughing. But you shouldn't have any trouble, right? With all the saving you did, you must have plenty of savings. Aren't you and Matthew living luxuriously?
Matthew moved into a dormitory this spring because commuting was tough. Damn. I have prepaid dorm fees and apartment loans. My savings? Drained by that woman. She was two-timing me with a younger guy.
Sounds tough for you, but it's none of my concern. Oh, and about the divorce trial deposit? I'll also take half the value of the apartment for distribution of property. When the invoice arrives, please transfer the full amount to my account. Kenneth was yelling on the other side, but I hung up without a care. One day, while returning from shopping in town, I bumped into Matthew. Dressed in his usual flashy fashion, with piercings all over his face, and his attention-grabbing hairstyle, he was easy to spot from a distance. Seeing me, Matthew raised his hand in greeting.
Hey, heard you're getting TANF.
I looked puzzled. Huh? Who are you mistaking me for?
Don't put on airs,
Matthew said, smirking.
It's obvious where an unemployed old lady like you would end up. If you had just obediently followed me and Dad, you'd still be living a comfortable life. It's pathetic, really.
Angry, I couldn't help but retort. Receiving TANF is a citizen's right. Any one of us could need it someday, due to illness or an accident. It's wrong to look down on that.
Yeah. So you're saying you're receiving it too?
Matthew said, dismissing me with a smirk and pointing his finger at me.
Listen, you and I are estranged. Don't come crying to me for money. Remember that.
As I opened my mouth to reply, he turned his back and disappeared into the crowd. I lowered my head, conscious of the stares of passers-by, shaking my shoulders. I couldn't help but laugh. It was just too ridiculous. Poor thing, he knows nothing. I can't wait to see his reaction when he finds out the truth. A few days later, I woke up and checked my phone to find an unbelievable number of missed calls from Matthew. Reluctantly, I called back, and Matthew shouted at me furiously.
You deceived me, old woman.
What are you talking about?
I heard from a cousin. You got 3 high-rise apartments from Grandpa's inheritance and are living a carefree life. Hiding that and getting a divorce is cowardly.
That's my personal asset. Why should I have to tell you or Kenneth?
It's joint property. You should have done a distribution of property with Dad during the divorce.
Unfortunately, it became mine after the divorce procedures, so I can't give it to Kenneth. Officially, I knew from Dad's will that it would be mine, but I delayed the procedures until after the divorce because I didn't want to share it with Kenneth. Then Matthew shouted in frustration.
A rich woman like you getting TANF? I'll report you to the authorities right now.
Feel free. It's not me, but Kenneth who's receiving it. Matthew fell silent.
What?
I told you last time. It's not me. I explained, as if speaking to a child. Honestly, even without the inheritance, I can live well. I have income from the cooking site and book sales I started in secret, but Kenneth, after spending all his money on his affair, had lots of payments piling up and was borrowing heavily. When his affair was discovered and he was fired, his income stopped. Are you listening?
Dad's on TANF? No way.
Ah! I pulled the phone away from my ear as Matthew screamed. Waiting for him to calm down, I continued. You really didn't know anything. He's too proud to tell his son. According to relatives he begged money from, he's behind on his apartment rent, facing eviction, and now stays at home all day in an old apartment. If you're worried, why don't you contact him? There was silence on the other side for a while. Then Matthew said resentfully,
You're cold-hearted. After all Dad did for you, you have no intention of repaying the favor. If you have money, you should give some to Dad.
Why should I? Ever since our marriage, it's been nothing but unpleasant memories, I don't feel indebted, I stated coldly. If you're so concerned, why don't you, his son, lend him money? You're working part-time after all.
I don't have savings. The part-time pay goes to, hanging out with friends and stuff.
Matthew suddenly became evasive, and I smirked. You've been living quite lavishly for a student. Borrowing money to hang out at clubs is not a good idea.
How do you know that?
The other day in town, I saw you from across the street. After we parted, you met up with a girl at a club and entered a brand store arm in arm. Also, a club membership card was left at the house, and using my credit card for shopping without my permission is out of the question. Matthew stammered in response.
That's unfair. You got high-rise apartments from Grandpa. Why don't I or Dad get a share? This is discrimination.
Yeah. The credit card bill will be sent soon. Make sure you pay it. Before I could finish, the call was disconnected. Sighing, I ended the call too. Just when I thought it was all over, a few months later, Kenneth and Matthew showed up at my parents' house without any notice. The doorbell rang incessantly, and when I answered, it was the two of them. Expecting they came to borrow money, I let them into the house to avoid causing a disturbance in the neighborhood. Kenneth and Matthew, who until recently were so stylish, now appeared drastically changed, wearing wrinkled shirts and dirty trousers, their eyes lifeless and gaunt. But they still had the energy to be sarcastic. Entering the living room, Kenneth looked around and sneered with a half-smile.
Same old house, huh? Why not sell one of those high-rise apartments, rebuild this place? Do something nice for Mom, living miserably on her pension.
This is Dad's house, and we like it this way. More importantly, when are you two planning to pay me back? You're past the deadline. Kevin lifted his chin arrogantly and said,
Hannah, I'll forgive you now, so let's remarry.
What?
You started a cooking site, right? If you manage the household perfectly, I'll even let you work. So come back. Such a generous dad, forgiving the wife who abandoned her husband and child. So Mom, why not live with Dad again? Living with just two women must be insecure.
Stunned, I was speechless. After a moment, intense anger welled up inside me. Don't joke with me. How much more do you plan to ridicule me? Furious, I yelled at the astonished Kenneth and Matthew. After treating me like nothing more than a housewife, hurling abuse, not providing proper living expenses, and then driving me out? Now you want me back just because you found out I inherited high-rise apartments? No way.
What? You're going to abandon us? Rich people really are stingy. Knowing we're struggling with money and still demanding payment, you're heartless. You were poor yourself until recently. Don't get cocky.
In the midst of the argument, Mom returned from shopping. Kenneth and Matthew immediately started buttering her up.
Please, lend us the money. We'll probably pay it back. Besides, isn't it unfair that only Hannah gets Grandpa's inheritance? Give me one of the high-rise apartments, too. Hi, Grandma. Long time no see. How have you been, Grandma? Please persuade Mom to remarry. Dad doesn't want to break up, but Mom is being stubborn.
Mom, surprised at first, changed her expression upon hearing their lines. She placed her echo bag on the fridge's floor and let out a deep sigh. So shameless, both of you.
What?
I'm telling you to have some shame. Startled by Mom's sudden loud voice, Kenneth and Matthew were understandably confused. Mom, usually calm, scolded them sharply. I've heard everything about the divorce from Hannah. I can't believe you have the nerve to show up here.
No. Hannah's exaggerating. You have to listen to our side, too. That's right, Grandma. Mom is quite the liar.
I remember how well you two behaved at my husband's funeral. Mom cut off Matthew's words and continued sternly. Arriving nonchalantly late to the funeral? not greeting me or the relatives, yawning through the service, and leaving before the coffin was sent off. And now you dare ask for his inheritance. Go back to sleep." She drove a taken aback Kenneth and Matthew to the front door and glared at them one last time. "You two are now strangers to us. Don't come here again. If you do, I'll call the police." Mom threw their shoes out the door, forcing them to leave in their socks, and immediately locked the front door. Kenneth, who had been avoiding paying me, was advised by his lawyer that a lawsuit would cost even more. Reluctantly, he finally transferred the money to my account. Even though Kenneth was fired from his job, he couldn't find another one, and the in-laws, hearing about their son's situation from relatives, stepped in to cover his debts. They visited my parents' house and apologized profusely for Kenneth's troubles. Later, Kenneth, having given up on finding a new job, returned to the countryside under the guise of helping with the family's farming. However, the story of our divorce spread through the village, leading to both children and elders pointing and laughing at Kenneth.
"There's thrifty Uncle Kenneth."
Even with the degree from a good university and a job at a big company, what's the use if your wife leaves you for being too arrogant?
"The reason for his divorce from his first wife was also his reckless spending. He'll never change."
Being mocked by the villagers is embarrassing. Remarry me to show them.
I kept receiving such persistent messages from Kenneth, so I deleted his contact. His mistress, apparently no longer interested after the money ran out, had long since left him. I found her with the detective's help and made sure she paid the divorce trial's security deposit. I also made Matthew reimburse for the card he used without permission. Though enrolled in a prestigious university and on track to become an elite like his father, Matthew started skipping classes and playing around, leading to failing grades and eventual expulsion. His friends and girlfriends were concerned, but Matthew, in his arrogance, alienated them with his prideful remarks. He then had a major argument with Kenneth, saying,
"You're my son, yet you won't help repay the debt?"
Now they're estranged. Matthew lives alone in a small apartment, making ends meet with part-time jobs. Gone are the days of buying whatever he wanted and enduring sarcastic remarks despite high earnings. For me, it's a refreshing change. With my cooking side taking off and a book deal finalized, I moved to the top floor of the high-rise apartment inherited from Dad. Mom is still healthy at 73. The high-rise is close to our family home, so it's convenient if anything happens to her. I'm planning a surprise hot spring trip for Mom's upcoming birthday. Though my marriage was a failure, I want to continue having a good relationship with Mom.
I used to think life was pretty straightforward. You work hard, find someone you love, and build a life together. At least, that's how I saw it when I first met Michael. He was charming, had a good job, and seemed to have his life in order. We clicked instantly, and before I knew it, we were married. He was the kind of guy who had a plan for everything. The wedding, the house, our future, it was like he had it all mapped out. I guess I got caught up in it all, thinking I'd hit the jackpot. "Susan, love, you don't need to work anymore," Michael said to me, shortly after our honeymoon. "I've got us covered. You can focus on the house, and soon, we'll start our family. Won't that be wonderful?" It sounded nice at the time. No more waking up early for the daily grind, no more dealing with office politics. Just a peaceful life at home, taking care of the man I loved and our future kids. So, I agreed. I quit my job at the trading company, a job I actually loved, to become a full-time housewife. But as days turned into months, and months into years, the picture Michael painted started to show its true colors. "Susan, is it really that hard to keep the house tidy?" Michael's voice would boom as he walked through the door, his eyes scanning for anything out of place. "And dinner? I hope it's something decent today. I'm tired of the same old stuff." I tried, God knows I tried. I kept the house spotless, learned new recipes, did everything I could to be the wife Michael wanted. But it was never enough. No, thank you, no, it's delicious, or you've outdone yourself. Nothing. It was like living with a ticking time bomb, never knowing what would set him off. The worst part? The silence. The absence of the pitter-patter of little feet, the laughter of a child, our child. It was a void, a constant reminder of what Michael considered my biggest failure. 3 years, Susan. 3 years and not even a sign of a baby. Do you know how embarrassing that is for me? Everyone at work is asking, and what do I say? That my wife can't do the one thing she's supposed to? His words would cut deeper than any knife. It wasn't like we hadn't tried. Doctor's appointments, tests, the works. But nothing. And instead of support, I got blame. As if it was my fault. As if I wanted this emptiness inside me, this feeling of being less than a woman. And then there were the gatherings. Michael loved showing off our home to his colleagues. Loved playing the big man in front of his friends. And I was reduced to a server, invisible yet scrutinized, bringing in drinks and food, trying to be the perfect hostess while my insides twisted with every laugh, every shared look between Michael and her, Sarah, his star colleague. Susan, make sure you don't embarrass me tonight. And keep an eye on Sarah, she likes her drinks a certain way, Michael would say, his eyes never meeting mine, always fixed on something, or someone, far more important. It was a life, sure. But it was a life unraveling, thread by thread, until I felt like I was nothing more than a shadow in my own home, a ghost of the woman I once was. The days began to blur, each one a mirror of the last. Wake up, clean, cook, try to dodge Michael's sharp comments, then sleep, and repeat. It was like living in a loop, a never-ending cycle of chores and criticisms. The house that was supposed to be a home felt more like a prison, and I, its unwilling inmate. Susan, are you even listening? Michael's voice snapped me out of my thoughts one evening. I looked up to see him glaring at me, a crease of annoyance on his forehead. I said, the Hendersons are coming over for dinner tomorrow. Make sure everything is perfect. I won't have you embarrassing me in front of my boss. I nodded, my voice barely a whisper. Yes, Michael. I'll take care of it. It was always about keeping up appearances, making sure everyone else saw the perfect picture, even if the frame was cracking at the edges. The next day was a flurry of activity. Cleaning, polishing, cooking, the house had to be spotless, the food nothing short of exquisite. It was exhausting, but I had learned long ago that it was better to just do it than to face Michael's wrath. The Hendersons arrived, all smiles and pleasantries. I played the part, the dutiful wife, serving and smiling, but inside, I was screaming. Screaming for a way out, for a moment of peace, for a life that felt like mine. After they left, Michael was in high spirits, the evening a success in his eyes. See, Susan? When you actually try, things go well. Keep this up, and maybe there won't be as much to complain about. His words stung, but I bit back the tears. Crying never helped, it only made things worse. So, I cleaned up, washing the dishes as the weight of Michael's expectations and my own helplessness settled on my shoulders like a lead cloak. The next morning, I woke up feeling off. My head was spinning, and my stomach churned. I brushed it off, thinking it was just exhaustion or maybe something I ate. But when it happened again the next day, and the day after, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Michael, I think I need to see a doctor, I said one morning, trying to keep my voice steady. I've been feeling really sick lately, and it's not getting better. He barely looked up from his phone. What now, Susan? Can't you handle a simple stomach bug? Fine, go see a doctor if you must, but make sure it's quick. You know we have plans this weekend. The doctor's appointment was a blur. Tests were run, questions asked, and then the wait. The wait that felt like an eternity. And then, the news I never expected, the news that changed everything. Congratulations, Mrs. Taylor, you're pregnant, the doctor said, her smile warm and genuine. Pregnant. The word echoed in my mind, a beacon of hope in the fog of my life. I was going to be a mother. A mix of joy and fear washed over me. Joy for the life growing inside me, and fear for how Michael would react. I rushed home, the news burning a hole in my pocket. "Michael," I said, bursting through the door, my heart racing. "I have something to tell you. We're going to have a baby." He looked at me, his expression unreadable. "A baby, huh?" he said, his voice flat. "Well, don't expect this to change anything, Susan. Pregnant or not, you still have your responsibilities here." His words hit me like a bucket of cold water. This was supposed to be a moment of happiness, of shared dreams coming true. Instead, it was just another cold reminder of the life I was trapped in. With the pregnancy confirmed, life took on a strange new rhythm. My body was changing, reacting in ways I had never anticipated. Morning sickness became my constant, unwelcome companion, making the already tough days feel endless. "Susan, what's wrong with you these days? You're moving like a snail," Michael barked one evening as I struggled to keep up with the household chores, my body heavy and my mind foggy from exhaustion. "I'm just tired, Michael. The doctor said it's normal during the first trimester," I replied, trying to mask the nausea that threatened to overwhelm me. "Normal? There's nothing normal about slacking off. You wanted this baby, now deal with it. But don't let this house turn into a mess," he retorted, his voice void of understanding or empathy. The harshness in his words stung, but it was nothing new. I had learned to swallow the pain, to keep my head down and carry on. But inside, a fierce protective instinct was growing. This baby, my baby, was depending on me, and I wouldn't let Michael's coldness dim the light of hope that was slowly, tentatively, beginning to grow within me. One evening, as I was setting the table for one of Michael's dinner parties, the room started spinning. The clatter of the plates and the murmur of conversation faded into a distant hum as everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the couch, Michael standing over me, his expression a mix of annoyance and concern. "What the hell, Susan? You're making a scene in front of my guests. Get up and get yourself together," he hissed, his words laced with embarrassment rather than worry. I think I fainted," I muttered, my voice weak, my body trembling. "Fainted? Don't be dramatic. Just get up and finish dinner. And try not to embarrass me any further," he snapped, turning away to rejoin his colleagues as if nothing had happened. The following day, after another round of nausea and dizziness, I knew I couldn't ignore my body's signals any longer. "Michael, I need to see the doctor again. Something's not right," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "Again? What now, Susan?" "You're pregnant, not incapacitated. Handle it," he replied, barely looking up from his phone. But this time I didn't back down. "No, Michael. I'm going. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about our baby, and I won't take any risks," I said, the protective fire within me burning brighter, stronger. The doctor's visit confirmed my fears. "You need to rest, Mrs. Taylor. Your body is telling you it's time to slow down. The stress and physical strain could be dangerous for you and the baby," the doctor warned, her words echoing my own thoughts. Armed with the doctor's advice, I returned home, ready to confront Michael, ready to fight for the well-being of our child. "Michael, we need to talk. The doctor said I need to rest more, that the stress and the work around the house could be dangerous for the baby," I said, my resolve unwavering. "Rest? Who's going to take care of everything then, Susan? You expect me to start doing your job now," he scoffed, his tone dismissive, his eyes cold. "No, I don't expect you to do anything. But I won't risk our baby's health. I won't. I need to go to my parents," I replied, the words pouring out, fueled by a newfound strength and the fierce love for the tiny life growing inside me. The conversation was far from easy, the resistance from Michael palpable. But the faint hope that had started this journey was no longer faint. This baby, my baby, was going to have a chance at a life filled with love and warmth, no matter what it took. The days at my parents' place were like a balm to my bruised soul. Away from Michael's cold glares and constant criticisms, I started to breathe a little easier, to feel a bit more like the Susan I used to be before my life became a series of chores and reprimands. But peace has a way of being fragile, especially when you're carrying around a secret as big as mine. I was 8 months pregnant, my belly a constant reminder of the life I left behind, and the life that was growing inside me. And then, that one call shattered the fragile peace I'd been clinging to. "Susan, you gotta hear this." My friend Lisa's voice was urgent, a low whisper on the other end of the line. "I saw Michael yesterday. And guess what? He wasn't alone. That woman from his office, Sarah, it's like they're a couple, Susan." My heart sank, a cold dread settling in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't just the betrayal, the blatant disrespect. It was the realization that the man I had married, the man I had built a life with, saw me as nothing more than a convenience, easily discarded, easily replaced. "Are you sure, Lisa? It's Michael." "My Michael," I managed to say, my voice a mere whisper, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Susan, I wouldn't tell you this if I wasn't 100%. I'm so sorry, girl. But you deserve better, you and your baby." Lisa's voice was firm, a stark contrast to the chaos swirling inside me. I hung up, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, hurt, disbelief. But more than anything, a fierce determination to not let this be the end of my story. "Mom, Dad, we need to talk," I said later that day, my parents sitting across from me in the living room, worry etching their faces at the seriousness in my voice. "What's wrong, honey?" my mom asked, her eyes searching mine, looking for a clue, a hint of what was tearing me apart inside. "It's Michael. He's been seeing someone else." "Someone from his office," I said, the words coming out in a rush, the truth laying bare the wound that was still fresh, still bleeding. My dad's face turned a shade darker, his jaw setting in that way it always did when he was about to lay down the law. "That scumbag. I knew he wasn't good enough for you. What are you going to do, Susan?" "I want to fight back. I want to make sure he doesn't just walk away from us, like it's nothing. I want to make sure he knows he can't just toss us aside," I said, the words fueled by a mixture of hurt and a newfound strength. And so, the plan was set in motion. My dad's friend, a former cop turned private investigator, was our best shot at getting the evidence we needed. Evidence that would show the world, show Michael, that I wasn't just a forgotten wife, a discarded piece of his past. "Susan, I'll take care of it. You just focus on yourself and the baby. We'll make sure this guy gets what's coming to him," the investigator, a grizzled man with eyes that had seen too much, assured me. Weeks rolled by, each one stretching longer than the last. The house, usually filled with tension, was now brimming with a silent storm, the kind that threatens to shatter everything in its wake. The private detective had done his job well, too well. The evidence he handed over was damning photos and videos that left no room for doubt. Michael's infidelity was laid bare, each image a stab in my heart. And Sarah, his colleague, the woman I had reluctantly hosted at my husband's request, was at the center of it all. "Can't believe this, can you, Susan?" my mom muttered as we sifted through the evidence one evening. Her face was a mix of anger and sympathy, her hand squeezing mine in a silent show of support. "You gonna let him get away with this? After everything?" I wiped my eyes, the reality of my situation settling like lead in my stomach. No, I can't. But it's not just me anymore. "It's her too," I said, my hand instinctively resting on my swollen belly. The baby, my little girl, was due any day now, and she was all that mattered. The birth was a whirlwind, a mix of pain, fear, and overwhelming love. When they placed her in my arms, her tiny fingers curling around mine, the world faded away. She was perfect, a tiny beacon of hope in the storm that was my life. Back at my parents' house, the atmosphere was a mix of joy and worry. My parents doted on their granddaughter, their happiness tinged with concern for the future. "Susan, she's beautiful. She's got your strength, I can tell, my mom said softly, her eyes meeting mine with an understanding that went beyond words. I smiled, the weight of the past weeks easing a bit in her presence. Thanks, Mom. She's what's keeping me going. My dad, ever the protective figure, glanced at the file that had been burning a hole in my mind. What's the plan, Susan? You ready to face this storm head-on? I looked at my daughter, her presence a silent reminder of the strength I had to muster. For her, I'll face anything. The air in my parents' home, usually thick with the scent of Mom's cooking and Dad's aftershave, had shifted. It was just days after my life had changed forever, bringing my daughter into the world. Her arrival was a slice of heaven in the turmoil that had become my life. Then, like a cold gust on a winter morning, Michael stormed in. His entrance was as subtle as a thunderclap, his eyes darting around, blatantly ignoring the tiny miracle in my arms. Susan, this circus has gone on long enough, Michael began, his voice sharp, cutting the air. I didn't marry a woman to have her lounge at her parents' place. It's time you returned and did what you're meant to do. I'm not bleeding money for a cleaner and a cook when I have you. I tightened my grip on my daughter, her innocence a stark contrast to the bitterness in front of me. Michael, you're living in a fantasy if you think I'm stepping back into that house, back into that life. It's not happening. His laugh was cruel, devoid of humor. Oh, really? And how do you plan on surviving, Susan? If you think I'm going to let you walk away with half of what's mine, you're sorely mistaken. I'll divorce you and make sure you don't get a dime. The audacity of his threat was almost laughable. Almost. I couldn't help but let out a chuckle, not of mirth, but of disbelief. Michael, you're the one who's mistaken. You seem to forget, I know all about your little affair with Sarah. I'm the one filing for divorce. And with the evidence I have, let's just say you won't be the one calling the shots. His face drained of color, the arrogance melting into panic. You're bluffing, Susan. You have nothing on me. That's when I decided it was time to lay my cards on the table. I pulled out the photos, the undeniable proof of his deceit. Does this look like a bluff to you, Michael? He lunged, desperation fueling his movements, but he was no match for my dad. Though years had passed since his days on the force, Dad's authority and strength hadn't waned a bit. He stepped between us, his presence alone enough to stop Michael in his tracks. Michael, I think you've overstayed your welcome. Leave my house, and don't you dare come back threatening my daughter. Dad's voice was calm, but the underlying warning was clear as day. Fear flickered in Michael's eyes, a fear that confirmed he knew better than to argue. He backed away, his retreat as graceless as his entrance. The door shut behind him with a thud that seemed to echo my heartbeat. Silence enveloped the room for a moment, the tension slowly dissolving. I looked down at my daughter, her serene face oblivious to the storm that had just passed. She was my beacon, my reason to stand tall against the chaos. Weeks turned into a blur, a mix of sleepless nights and endless paperwork. My lawyer, Mr. Jenkins, was a no-nonsense guy, his office always smelling like strong coffee and determination. We were gearing up for a legal battle, and the air was thick with anticipation. Susan, we're in for a rough ride. You sure you're up for this? Mr. Jenkins asked as we sat in his office, papers spread out like a map of the battlefield ahead. I held my daughter close, feeling her steady breaths. I've never been sure of anything, Mr. Jenkins. It's not just for me, it's for her too. The day we filed the lawsuit felt like stepping into a storm. The papers, heavy with the weight of my broken marriage, were now in the hands of the court. Mr. Jenkins was a force to be reckoned with, his every word in the courtroom sharp and precise. Then came the day of reckoning. The courtroom was imposing, its walls echoing the sound of justice. Michael was there, his face a mask, his lawyer whispering last-minute strategies. Susan, you don't have to do this. We can work it out, Michael hissed as I passed him, a last-ditch attempt to sway me. I met his gaze, feeling nothing but the fire of resolve burning within me. Work it out? That ship has sailed, Michael. See you in court. The hearing was intense, every word, every piece of evidence, a nail in the coffin of Michael's lies. Mr. Jenkins presented the photos, the videos, the undeniable truth of Michael's betrayal. Michael's lawyer tried to defend, to deflect, but the evidence was too strong, the betrayal too blatant. When the judge finally spoke, his voice was the sound of finality. In light of the evidence presented, I rule in favor of Mrs. Susan Taylor. Divorce granted, full custody awarded, and Mr. Taylor, you are to pay $150,000 in compensation and $1,500 in alimony monthly. The gavel's bang was like a thunderclap, sealing Michael's fate, marking the end of a battle hard fought. But the storm wasn't over yet. The ripples of our legal battle spread, reaching the place where it all started, Michael's office. His superiors didn't take kindly to the scandal, the affair that had spilled into the public eye. Michael was demoted, the golden boy image he had cultivated shattered by his own actions. And Sarah, the other half of the deceit, found herself out of a job, her involvement with a married man staining her reputation beyond repair. The dawn of a new day never felt so real, so vivid. The courtroom battles were behind us, the storm had passed, and the world seemed to be opening up with possibilities. My daughter, now a constant source of joy and strength, was growing fast, her giggles filling the house that once echoed with arguments and despair. One morning, as the sun spilled its golden light through the windows, Mom walked into the kitchen, her smile as warm as the coffee she poured. You know, Susan, seeing you and this little munchkin makes all the worries fade away. You've done well, really well. I looked up from feeding my daughter, her tiny hands grabbing at the spoon. Thanks, Mom. It's been tough, but she makes it all worth it. Dad came in, his presence always so reassuring. Susan, you've shown what real strength is. And this little one, he said, gently tickling my daughter's chin. She's got a great mom. The days were no longer a countdown to another argument or a court date. They were filled with laughter, baby talk, and plans for the future. I had gone back to work, my old job at the trading company welcoming me back with open arms. Balancing motherhood and a career wasn't easy, but it felt right, like pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had led me to a new dawn, a fresh start. As I looked around, at the photos of my daughter, at the home filled with love and support, I knew that this was just the beginning. A new chapter, not just for me, but for my little girl, a chapter where the skies were clear, and the possibilities endless. The dawn had broken, and with it, a world of hope and promise had opened up. The storm was behind us, and ahead lay nothing but the warm glow of a new day.